Hello, my name is Ebenezer Narh. I'm a PhD candidate at Western University's Department of Geography and Environment. It's an honor to be part of this year's National Policy Challenge to present on the topic No Longer Hidden in the Cracks of Federalism, Data and Policy Insights on Higher Education Student Migration in Canada. As you may know, Federalist Canada is a combination of several constitutionally independent provinces and governments that share exclusive or concurrent powers with each other. In the words of former Prime Minister Pierre Elliott Trudeau, federalism is by its very essence a compromise and a pact. There is the federal government, the provincial government, and the municipal government. Among these three levels of government, higher education is the responsibility of the provincial governments. The various provinces run parallel higher education systems and hardly interfere or overlap with each other. No wonder Glenn Jones claims that there is no such thing like a national system of higher education in Canada. Even though Jones made this assertion over 20 years ago, it still holds true today. In fact, Larry Orton and many of his colleagues at Statistics Canada have worked to unify post-secondary education in Canada. Orton bemoans the lack of standard classification for higher education institutions and a comprehensive national data on higher education. Obviously, there are cracks in federalism in terms of higher education in Canada. Despite the cracks in federalism, there are three main ways that higher education unites provinces and government. The first is universities forming alliances, such as the Maple League of Universities among the Atlantic provinces, and the U15, which is the coming together of 50 universities across the individual provinces in Canada. There is also the Tri-Council funding, which is a federal funding for research in various universities. And then there's a third way which lacks research in Canada by comparison to these two ways identified. Considering that migration is a federal responsibility, higher education being a provincial responsibility, and economic development being the responsibility of the municipal government, hidden in the intersection of these three important issues is higher education student migration. Now, student migration is nuanced, but for the purpose of this presentation, it is examined as the internal movement of students from one CMA to another. At this juncture, I'll talk briefly about higher education enrollment in Canada. These are students, and recent data from Statistics Canada shows that student enrollment into higher education continues to increase nationwide year after year. This is important because student migration creates annual repeated waves of student population movement. These students are migrating to study in universities or colleges. One can imagine higher education institutions as magnets, attracting students from across the country. Indeed, approximately 10% of these students would cross provincial boundaries to attend university. This rate could translate to about 200,000 students annually. Recognizing the volume of the student migration flows even at the provincial level in the case of Canada, researchers are keen on studying the factors, motivations, patterns, and the scale of these movements. Most of the student migration research have detailed the US experience. Contributions from the UK also add to the student migration literature. At the provincial level, students prefer to study in nearby provinces. Other studies have examined the push and pull factors behind primary move. Adding to the student migration literature overview, student migration may be framed in the wider literature of to school or after school migration or both. The research literature has gone in different directions, mostly abroad. Notwithstanding some of these Canadian works, the extant literature in Canada lacks a comprehensive national picture compared to other places. However, Statistics Canada's post-secondary student information system, which is known as PCIS, allows to have for the first time a full national consistent picture of student migration. Turning to the research design, the overarching aim of this presentation is to describe and analyze higher education student migration in Canada using the PCIS dataset for the 2016-2017 academic year. To this end, two research questions are addressed. First question is, to what extent do higher education students in Canada's largest CMAs migrate to study elsewhere? Secondly, how does gender and program of study influence the migration flows? As indicated earlier, The data used for the analysis is the PCS dataset. PCS is a national survey. The data permits for the analysis because of two main features of the data. That is, the location of students' origin based on the reported postal codes, as well as the demographic and program information of students. In terms of the methods, there was the data cleaning and sample selection step, generating the flow matrix through a cross-tabulation of the CMA of origin and CMA of destination, and mapping the flows in ArcGIS. Finally, there was the statistical Z-test analysis in SAS. Moving on to the results. Here is a flow map showing the interprovincial student migration in Canada. We see how federalism is bridged by connecting students from one province to another. Behind this image is a spatial interaction matrix which PCS makes it possible to construct. This interaction flow matrix is the overall matrix showing the departure of students from CMAs of origin to CMAs of destination. This overall matrix is subsequently split by gender and also separately by science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, that is STEM programs. Montreal and Quebec CMAs are included in the origins due to unreported postal codes in pieces. The matrix shows the volume of the out-migration flows from the individual CMAs. We also see, for instance, 9,130 non-migrant students in Halifax and 156,680 in Toronto. On average, 27.4% of students, or 1 in 4 students, moved out to study elsewhere. If not for the exclusion of the CMAs from Quebec, which is the second most populous province in Canada, and cells that did not meet RDC's minimum counts, the volumes and the rate of the migration flows could be higher. This map shows the log transformation of the volumes of the outflows from Canada's largest CMAs. The symbolization at this national scale is quite detailed. However, this is to show how integrated student migration is across the country. From this map, we see the highest out migration of students within the Toronto area as highlighted. When zoomed to this area, it becomes clear that there were about 13 to 32% of student migrants who moved elsewhere from Toronto to the benefit of nearby CMAs such as Hamilton and Guelph. At this scale, we see a clearer picture of both the complexity and integration of regions. It bears emphasizing that these flows are repeated annually for both student migration and labor movements. To determine the effect of students' gender and STEM discipline on the volume of flow, a Z-test analysis was conducted to compare the overall migration flows to the flows of gender groups, that is male and female, and STEM groups, that is STEM versus non-STEM discipline. I also compared the migration volume among the gender groups and STEM groups. As highlighted in the table, the results showed that there is a significant difference between the overall migration and that of gender groups, except for the comparison of male versus females in Halifax and Ottawa-Gatineau. This implies that gender has significant effect on the rate of out-migration of students, albeit small, as shown in the effect sizes highlighted in yellow. In the same vein, we see STEM program with significant effect on the rate of migration compared to the overall migration flows, except in Halifax and non-STEM disciplines in Ottawa and Gatineau. Again, the effect of STEM and non-STEM disciplines on the migration flow is small, as shown in the effect sizes highlighted in yellow. Policy implications. With the advent of the creative or talent-driven economy, cities should be interested in talent attraction and retention for their economic development. Second is the need for a comprehensive national data to aid research and policy on student migration. Here are some potential research we can use pieces to advance the results in this presentation, but for some of its limitations such as the unreported postal codes, we could have seen how the student migration flows not only includes Quebec but brings the country together. Finally, although constitutionally Federalist Canada runs parallel higher education systems, there are limited ways that these bring parallel systems together. This presentation has shown one new way that higher education systems are connected through the movement of students from one CMA to another and across provincial boundaries. It has been my pleasure to give this presentation, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Here are the references I used. Thank you.